Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and welcome to Season 2 of the Audiobook Club with John York. The Audiobook Club, partnered with Pro Audio Voices, celebrates audiobooks, the amazing people and teams who make them happen, as well as the various talents behind storytelling. To learn more about Amplify and other opportunities to grow your sales, platform, and audience, head over to proaudiovoices.com and listen out for a short but informational advertisement within this episode. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, we're so lucky to be joined by actor, voice actor, and audiobook narrator Jess Nahikian. Jess, it's such a joy to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm really great. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Yeah, there's quite bad snow in the UK at the moment, which is weird for March, but it's been both nice and a little terrifying.
Yeah, we've had some nice weather here. Actually, fortunately, we had some weird weather last week, and then now we're back to nice. It's been kind of all over the place.
So you're based in New York City, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I live uptown in Manhattan, and you know, it's working in audio and living in Manhattan is like it's its own little adventure.
Yeah, I bet there's such a great audiobook community and voiceover community in New York. I'm incredibly envious.
Yeah, it's an amazing community. I feel really, really lucky to have found it's just such a diverse, nerdy, kind group of individuals who are just keeping people company in their own private spaces. It's great. I just think that there's something really precious about this community. And especially in New York, we have just so many people, especially after the pandemic, too. Lots of people kind of moved into audio. So that's been, I love it. It's been amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the things about the pandemic, isn't it? It's like there was I noticed that myself, even here in the UK, there was so much more interest there. And I suppose it's that kind of thing of like the lockdowns gave people like really a chance to sort of realize their dreams and passions and sort of give that sort of oomph for them to go and chase after it.
Absolutely, because there was no like, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Like, no, because what are you doing? What else are you going to do? One of my favorite comedians is like, there was no excuse for not doing the things that you wanted to do because literally nothing else was happening. So there was no like, oh, too busy, like really don't have the time. No, you have nothing but time. You have nothing but time. So yeah, no, I actually, I happened to purchase my booth in January of 2020. So it was a particularly, hi Stevie, that's my dog. So I actually ended up having my booth basically installed in my apartment about a month before we went into lockdown. It was crazy.
Yeah. Was that just like good timing then on your part?
Yeah. It was this craziest moment of my life, just because it just seemed so serendipitous. But yeah, no, it was really good, and what it really allowed me to do is spend a lot of really concerted time figuring out what I wanted to do with this particular craft. So I feel really lucky. Yeah.
Well, so you've recently been included on Audible's Best of the Year 2022, as well as been involved with a movie premiering at Sundance, and then not to mention releasing banger after banger with audiobooks. Like, how is life at the moment for you? Could you tell us a little bit about those projects?
Yeah, life is really, really good. One of my best friends sent me like a reductress meme that was like, things are going well for woman, so now she's terrified. I'm feeling a little bit like that because I do all of this work by myself and in my booth at least, and it's wild to have it be received, but also I'm so grateful to have it be received so broadly and with such with such kind words. So yeah, no, it was very cool. I got an email from my publisher the day the list came out, and I was like, oh, that's wild. It's funny, John, it's actually the day I met you. I found out on my way to that little dinner we went to.
Oh, so, no way.
Yeah, some serendipity there. So yeah, no, it's been really good. I got to do some voices on a pretty popular video game recently, so I'm really looking forward to that coming out. And it's just it's been a pretty cool artistic time. Yeah, And actually, yesterday we found out that the movie that went to Sundance that got picked up by Sony. So,
Oh my God.
it's a crazy moment to be me. But I'm just like so grateful for everybody who's kind of like loved me and taught me into this moment.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it without a community of people around you cheering you on. So I feel really, really good about that, and I feel excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. It just goes to show how you're a much better person than I am, because if I'd have found out that I'd have been included on that Audible's Best of the Year list on the day that I was going to an event, there wouldn't have been a single person on that table who wasn't aware. I would have...
Yeah, it's funny. I've always been a little bit like that. I like to figure out how I feel about successes before I talk about them, which I don't know what that says, but I sometimes like to hold it pretty close to the chest and cherish it before I get anybody else's feedback on what it means.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. It's been a wild time. I've nicknamed my booth the Mystery Machine because it's like Scooby Doo. Because I've just been doing mystery after mystery this year. It's been crazy. I'm just like murder person.
Yeah. Do you find yourself going like sort of? Do you find yourself sort of being like appealed to those genres, or are those just the sort of jobs that you keep getting asked back for?
It's a little bit of both. About to really part the kimono here on my nerdy past, but I grew up playing a lot of like point and click video games, and one of my favorites was the Nancy Drew detective series. Yeah. So those were just like crazy little mysteries that were weirdly animated for the 90s. It was a great moment in video game history. But no, I really liked mysteries. From the time I can remember, it's been my favorite genre. Loved true crime for the moment it was having in like 2016 when everybody loved true crime. I think it's just a part of my literary DNA. And so it feels it's really fun to do a lot of mysteries and a lot of murder mysteries. I do have to like take care of myself because they can, if you're like really stuck in them for too long.
Oh yeah.
You can it can start to wear on you.
Yeah, I bet.
Too much sad sometimes.
Absolutely, and you start sort of going through your life very suspiciously.
Yeah, exactly. And it can bring you down in ways that you're not always aware of. In the same way that I think it can lift you up. Like I'm sure you're familiar when you have a really good interview or when you are working on something that's just really well written and you get in that pocket where you feel like you're in the flow. It's like super joyful. So I think you got to take the good with the bad. But yeah, sometimes it requires a walk in the park.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. You just have to kind of look after yourself. And I find that like I have to be really careful kind of what TV shows I watch as well, just in my own time.
Totally.
Because I think, if you're not feeling that great anyway, and then, you're watching something that's like really sad or like kind of destructive, it can bring you down even further.
Yeah, it can really be like confirmation of how shit things are or how garbage things are.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we swear on this podcast?
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'd like to, if it's okay, just before we jump into some more specific questions, I'd love to start by kind of getting to know a little bit more about your background, if that's okay. Could you share with us like how you found yourself acting and in the world of VO and audiobooks and all that goodness?
Yeah, I'm one of those like lame people who has always wanted to do it. So I went to a high school that kind of had opportunities to focus in theater, and I did that for 2 years of my high school experience. And then while I was in high school, there was a lot of support and encouragement towards continuing your education if you wanted to in art or whatever. But we had a lot of really great support, and somebody recommended to me the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. At the time, it was RSAMD. But I went over there. I happened to like really feel a sync moment when I did some research on it, and I decided that I was gonna go for a couple of weeks. They do some summer courses, so I ended up doing that, and I just fell in love with it. There were some tutors there that were just like, I really felt in sync with, and it felt like the right thing to do. So knowing that they had a 4% acceptance rate, I just worked my butt off for the next year. And I ended up getting accepted, and I went over, and it was the time of my life, and also super tough. I was 18 and living alone in Scotland. It was crazy. So yeah, when we were there, we did some voiceover, and I felt like I had some pretty good voice training, having had those resources during school. And then when I graduated, like I had, I think when everybody is young and an artist, some pretty specific ideas about where I was going to fit in the world of acting and the industry. And none of those were immediate hits. I thought I was only ever going to do theater. I wanted to stay in the UK. All of these very specific ideas about what a successful life in art would look like. And pretty swiftly, Brexit happened and my visa fell through, and I was back home. And the only thing I could figure out how to do after like my whole life was kind of shifted very swiftly was to just start planting seeds. And so I did some like scratch VO for somebody, and while I was there, I paid some extra cash to the engineer, and we recorded an audiobook demo, and then I sent that off to I grew up in West Michigan. So somebody had mentioned Brilliance, which is now part of Amazon, but they were like, you should submit to Brilliance, with all of your like real stuff. And so I did. Didn't hear anything for a year. Moved to New York, started doing some TV stuff, and then I got a call from Brilliance, and then I just fell in love with it. It's like I just fell in love with it. I was no good at it. I was just garbage. All I wanted to do was like push every syllable and like I wanted to. I was no good, but I really loved it, and so I just tried to get good. I was just like kept throwing myself against the wall. I hired a really great coach and had him, tear me apart and help me figure out what my voice was going to look like, what my artistic voice was going to look like, the things I wanted to say artistically. He was amazing. And so I kept working with Brilliance, and then just kind of snowballed from there, as I think it does for a lot of people. It can kind of really encompass you, kind of like draw you in. I think it's a lot of that. We were talking about community earlier. I think it has a lot to do with that. The community is just so supportive and loving, and I think the work is just so personal that it's hard to be competitive. And so I think it was a place that I felt really loved and supported artistically. So there was no way I wasn't going to continue.
I think you're absolutely right. And there is it's strange to say community, because I absolutely agree with you. But I think it's strange because obviously it's quite an isolated job, or it can be, especially if you're working from home. Yeah. But yet there's just something about the audiobook industry in particular, I feel, that just I think maybe because we're, a lot of us are in solitude a lot of the time, that when we are sort of, interacting with each other, it really is just such an overwhelmingly welcoming space to be.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that comes from the fact that it's isolated, and how much of it comes from just the kinds of people this work attracts. I think you have to be pretty self-led. You have to be pretty flexible. You have to be pretty driven. And I think that I wonder if there are it just attracts a certain breed of artist, and there's some simpatico there. It is funny that you mentioned it's such a strong community for such an something we all do in isolation. At most, right, if you're in with a publisher, you've got like 4 people in the room at most.
Yeah.
Like that's like wow, there's a lot of folks here. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually going into my first in-person session in a while next week. And it'll be interesting how much different that is, because it's always different than me punching myself in or self-directing. It'll be interesting.
Do you find yourself nervous in situations like that? I mean, even though you're no stranger to recording audiobooks and no stranger to this industry, do you find yourself getting a little bit nervous, as you say, if it's been a little while going back and doing it in front of people live as opposed to recording at home?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of just being perceived that goes along with being in person. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't describe it as nervousness, but it's just a very different workflow. I find it a little bit more tiring because there's a little bit more of being on, because you're communicating with your director, you're communicating with the producers on your break or whatever. And I just find it to just be a little bit more, it requires a little bit more of me to be in studio than it does to be in my booth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just an element. I think it's like when you're working from home and no one's watching, you can sort of just switch off, kind of like in between, just sort of go into like, I do anyway, go into like a little bit of a trance state between chapters, and then
totally. Or you can like get up and make yourself tea in your house, and you're not like, hey, where's the tea? It's a familiar environment, and I think that's. It just is a little bit more comfortable. But I really also really enjoy being in person, because like one thing that sometimes I feel a little bit drained by this job is that like there's really not a lot of feedback. Like there's just, if you're not being directed or you're not in studio, like it's really just you and the mic and your own feedback loop of like what you're looking to do and what you hope this book will sound like, and it's a lot of just like, I think it's exciting always to have somebody on the other end of the headset experiencing the thing you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Because it feels a little bit more active and a little bit more like I can see how this will land on people when they're actually listening to it in their car, rather than I hope this is something, So I think that's an exciting part of being in person.
Yeah, absolutely. You're no stranger to recording voiceover for video games, of course. And now this particular medium being an incredibly popular suggested topic for this show, I'd love to know how your process adapts when working on a video game. Could you perhaps share with us like kind of what the audition process looks like, developing a voice for that character, and just your general overall experience when recording for video games?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that it's even in the same, like, job sphere, because it's not the same job. I think narration, I have a great friend, Mia, who I think you know, Mia.
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, so Mia and I went to high school, college, and now live in New York within 5 blocks of each other. So, like, we go way back. But Mia had this beautiful way of looking at audiobooks that was like, we're giving people the gift of our time, and we're keeping them company in their private spaces.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like a really beautiful way of looking at audiobooks. And I think in that way, there has to be a familiarity when you're narrating an audiobook, a truth-telling that's about keeping the listener engaged, but also sort of a specific kind of intimacy. And when you're working on voiceover, that's no longer a consideration, right? Because you're not actually keeping people company. What you're doing is creating a single character that is recognizable and full of life.
Yeah. So
that it transcends the fact that nobody's face is expressing the text, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to create more of an archetype rather than like a comfortable situation. So when I get a voiceover breakdown, it really depends. I'll talk about specifically like fantasy video games, right? Mm-hmm. So what you want to do is, what I'll do is you do all the research you would normally do on any project. So you look up the casting director. What else do they cast? What other projects have they worked on? And then usually I'll try to watch some of that for about 30 minutes or so and get an idea of where that sits. So like if it's a video game, I'll watch like playthroughs on YouTube. It's insane that this is my job. Like this is what my partner does for fun.
Yeah.
Like sits on YouTube and is like, oh, I really got to get to work. And here I am just like, I am at work. No, so I'll watch some of that and get an idea of where it sits. And then usually what you'll get is like an illustration, an artist's concept, from casting. And now that's not always where the character will land. Sometimes they'll tweak the art after they cast somebody in the animating process. But usually it's a pretty solid idea of who this character is. Now, the things I look for, especially in fantasy, what kind of weapon are they carrying? What outfit are they in? And are there any specific things in the breakdown that would lead to vocal choices? And so when I have that, then I start to try to find what the mix of masculine and feminine is in the voice. I try to figure out if they're more of a projecting strong voice or if they're maybe a little bit more relaxed or a little bit more soft or sexy. I just try to bring out all those colors. And usually what I'll do is play with 3 or 4 versions until I find something that I feel like fits. And then you read your lines. And it's so funny because voiceover is usually like 5 or 6 lines. It's not a lot for an audition. So most of that process is finding the voice that fits what they're looking for in the tone of the thing.
Yeah. I find it so fascinating that sort of building up process, especially in like the research part of it. Is research a big part for you when going for a job? Is that like a section that you really enjoy?
Yes, research is important to me because it helps me feel like I can ground myself in some level of a tone, right? I think research is big for me in terms of because there are all kinds of animation voiceover needs, right? Like you've got your little kids, and that's a very different tone than your I'm a badass lady with a sword. That's a very different type of storytelling. And then you also have your very intimate video games that are just right here, and all of that is very different. And so the research element helps me feel like I understand that the choices I'm making are in the pocket of the story that's being told. It was a piece of advice that was given to me by a director on a video game session, which was just that acting is a really important element and finding the voice is a really important element, but also knowing the thing you're in. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky to figure out, especially if you're working on a new game. And then you just kind of have to look at what else the studio has done. Yeah, I think research is really important. I guess I'm finding that out. Yeah, because I guess without the research, I don't know where to begin. It's my starting line.
Just moving on to a different topic, if that's okay. How are you at dealing with uncertainty? Because I get a lot of messages on this show for those who are starting out in the industry, and this may be their first kind of endeavor into a career path that is self-led, and you don't technically, you don't necessarily know what you're going to be doing a few months down the line. And I just wondered, first of all, how are you at dealing with uncertainty, and then also if you have any advice for those who are in that position, just starting out, who are finding themselves having to cope with this for the first time.
That's a really good question. Probably really, really early in my career, I dealt with a lot of maybe resentment and fear around the unknown. I felt like I had worked really hard to get where I was and that the uncertainty was against me. And then I found the audiobook world and I found my voice artistically. And I think what that gave me was the ability to kind of settle in my in myself a little bit more. And with that, I think I realized that uncertainty is not exclusive to this industry. Uncertainty is everywhere, always. And it's a part of life that is I've tried to reframe my uncertainty into a barometer for my care for the thing I'm doing. Like if something is feeling uncertain, maybe that's because I'm trying something new. Or if something is feeling uncertain, maybe that's because I don't actually have a lot of control. But me indulging the uncertainty and considering it as like a thing I have to conquer is not particularly helpful because I'm not going to. And so I try to look at the uncertainty and just say like, oh, I'm really caring about this right now. Okay. And like I just try to leave it there. It's easier said than done. I also go to therapy. That's a huge part of my uncertainty practice is like, just dealing with it. 'Cause it's, and if I can take a left onto a mini tangent here, I think, for those of us who are not at the end of our careers, this AI revolution has been a really big trigger for a lot of people because of its relationship to artistic uncertainty. And I think change is necessary. And it's not always good, but it's necessary. And so with that major uncertainty that I am super not looking forward to dealing with, that's been a really good moment for me where I've been able to say, oh, yeah, my threshold for uncertainty is higher than it used to be. Like I can withstand more uncertainty. And I would say that like if you're just starting out, sitting with your uncertainty and expanding your capacity for it will serve you because it will allow you to be flexible and it will allow you to have the fun that you're trying to have. Because I think like nobody's getting into this because it's like a quick buck or an easy thing. People get into this because it's a good time. And it is a good time. And so if you can sit with your uncertainty and just let that be a natural part of what's coming up for you, I think you can just have a little bit more fun. And I think always engaging with the thing you're trying to get better at and picking what you like and what you don't like and trying to engage with the scary and engage with the things you're not good at. Like facing all of that is going to be way better of a time, I think.
I resonate with that a lot. I think because uncertainty was like a massive thing for a massive issue for me, really, because I just I struggled a lot with it, and I didn't know at some points if I was able to kind of cope with it. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's an actor, and he was he sort of sat me down one day and said like, well, have you got any interest in doing anything else? And I said no. And he says like, have you got any transferable skills that could, let you do anything else? I said no. He said, well, you don't really have much choice. and he kind of just put everything in perspective. I thought, well, this is it. I'm just gonna have to buckle down.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's like a reality for a lot of people in this industry is like, it's not always like a moment of clarity. Sometimes it's just shit enough for long enough that you're just like, well, I guess this is just how it is.
Yeah.
And like in that there is a lot of freedom, right? Like, okay, this is just what it's going to be. And I think as a person in the world, I think especially for creative people, it's important to know what kinds of struggles are deepening you and what kinds of struggles are smothering you. And I think for some people, they get into this career and it's smothering for them, the uncertainty. And that's totally valid and does not make them a failure or a bad artist. Or it's just an unfortunate reality of art interacting with capitalism. And it's, it's just, it doesn't mean you're no good if it's not for you. It's a lifestyle in many ways that you have to be on board with. And if it smothers you, there's no reason to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you completely. Another topic that I get messaged a lot about, even though I've mentioned it quite a few times on the show, new messages keep asking me to ask. So, I'm gonna I'm gonna ask if that's okay. But networking is something that we hear over and over again that we should be doing more as creatives and artists and such, expanding our network and our colleagues and friendships. What's your experience networking? Is it something that you like kind of actively keep on top of? Is it have you got any kind of thoughts on networking in general?
The people who are for you will not lose sight of who you are. The people, I think what's really important is not trying to be everybody's solution. I think what's really important in networking for me, right? And I think a lot of people have a lot of different views on this. For me, I really want to get to the end of my career and feel like I had real relationships with people that transcend the work that we're doing together. And that's not always possible. Sometimes you're working with people and they're just colleagues. But I think one thing that's really important for me is feeling like I know and trust that if somebody I am working with has something to say about the work I'm doing, that they can and that they will. And so what I really try to foster in my networking connections is the basics of like, this is who I am, this is the kind of work I'm doing, and this is the kind of work I'm interested in doing. But also really finding the people you enjoy who are making the work you're interested in doing. Because those relationships will outlast any working relationship.
Yeah.
And that's just what's important for me. So when I'm email writing, I try, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you got to write the email that's like, hey, we all know why we're here. I want a job and you should give me one because I would like it, please. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and we do the dance of like, hey, how are you? How's the weather where you are? And like, we got to do it and everybody knows what's happening. And that's just like true. You have to do those parts of networking. And that's something I am slowly but surely learning is just part of it, right? Like that's the boring stuff. That's your vegetables. But the part of it that matters, I think, is when, I have a really great friend who has been a really big supporter of me for a long time. And whose career has moved in a bunch of different ways in the audiobook world. And now this person is doing really quite well. And we're still friends. And I think we kind of came up together. And I really treasure that relationship because that's one of those people who I feel our relationship transcends the industry. And that's what matters to me. And so I guess I'm not afraid of missed connections when networking. And I think that that's probably served me and made me pretty lucky. Because I think that if there's a missed connection, it's fine. First of all, things come around again. But also, it's okay. Like, there are enough people doing this work that you don't have to be everybody's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think keeping things authentic is important. And those people who see you will see you.
Absolutely. I think that's such great valid points. I agree with you completely. Another big topic that I'm asked to ask is about auditioning, because auditioning is a huge aspect of the VO and audiobook world and acting world in general, of course. Do you have kind of any advice for auditioning? Like, is there like a certain mindset that one has to adopt that you found that's helped you to, like, avoid getting too obsessed with a particular job, or like, kind of to sort of limit disappointment if there's like a particular job that you really wanted, if something falls through, etc. Have you got any sort of thoughts on auditioning as a whole?
This has been a huge practice for me. When I was speaking earlier about, and you said you have some familiarity with this uncertainty business, auditioning was a huge part of what I had to work through. Because I found that auditioning, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree, I'll be interested to hear, but it's not the same thing. It is both exactly the work you'll be doing if you book it, and not at all the work you'll be doing if you book it, right? Because I think, when you're auditioning, something that's really important is to find you in that piece. I think when I was first auditioning, I was really, really stuck on what was right. What did they want to hear? What did they need to hear to know that I could do it? And this may just be the result of some just longevity, right? Like just doing it enough that there is no way to feel strongly about every single audition. But I think that the main thing is finding yourself in it, right? And where your voice lives if this were you. And it's not about, like if they want a person whose voice sounds different than yours, they'll hire that person. So I think it's really important to not get too caught up in like, oh, I want to sound like Scott Brick or I want to sound like Julie Whalen because it's like what I hear in my head. It's like, no, just do it your way. And if it's for you, you'll get it. And also, you don't want to be on a job you're not right for. Yeah. I think that's really important. Is like, sometimes that can be really disappointing because if you don't book a job for like 2 months, you're like, okay, am I just not good at, like, am I just not good for any of these? Like, it can feel really frustrating. But I think the truth is you don't want to be 3 8-hour days in a booth on a book you can't accomplish in the way that it needs to be accomplished. It's no fun for anybody. It's not fun for you. It's embarrassing and hard and vulnerable. It's not fun for the producers. It's not fun for the author. It's not fun for the listener. Like, that's sort of what I mean about like not being concerned about missed opportunities. Is that there are, if you fill your life, if you try to focus your networking and your career building as increasing your opportunities, right? Like I said earlier that I tried to plant some seeds. I try to think about auditioning like that, right? I don't know which seeds are going to come up. So I try to plant as many as I can. And I do my best. Some seeds were never, they were, like they got wet last season and like won't grow. Like that's like the way that it goes. And I think making sure that your relationship to auditioning is the relationship you want to have to the art, right? So like focusing on the things that are important. What is this person feeling in this moment? Who do your research? Who else has narrated books for this author, right? Like listen to what they did because often authors are picking. But also just like really finding yourself in it, right? Like close your eyes. Imagine what it smells like in this moment before you start narrating. Imagine what sounds you're hearing. Imagine what the character you're playing might be experiencing emotionally and then start. Rather than like, okay, right? Like, it's not that, right? It's because anybody can do that, right? But only a person can know themselves. And so the only person you should be trying to be is yourself if you are in these circumstances. Audition a lot. However you can figure out how to do that. There are a bunch of online places where you can, bid $50 to do like Fiverr stuff. Yeah. But and I'm not suggesting that anybody do that. But I'm saying that like download copy or watch commercials, write it down, and then you go do it. Audition a lot. Like, as much as you possibly can. It will get your body comfortable in the space of auditioning and with the uncertainty. And at some point, it will not be a thing anymore because you'll have done it enough that your body is just like, oh, I know what's happening. We're auditioning. That. That. And then also always have something that you're working on that isn't, that is creative, that is not related to this. Because just like something else. Like right now I'm making, this will air by the time, I'm sure, the time I give them to her. Right now I have a friend who's narrating a series of books about mooses.
Oh, nice.
Moosin? Moosin? What's the plural of moose?
I have no clue.
Anyway, she's narrating a series that is all about this moose. And so I'm making her like a pair of moose ears to go over her headphones with my sewing machine.
That's brilliant.
And like, it's giving me so much joy. And every time I get stuck or like frustrated or like, oh, no one's ever going to hire me again, I'll just like go and like sew a little bit on this silly little thing that has nothing to do
Yeah.
with anything, you know?
Oh, that's great. I mean, not only the Musi is a fantastic idea, but it's also a fantastic idea to make sure that you've got something that you can just sort of take your brain away and sort of use it in another form to stop, to help kind of calm yourself down if you're getting stressed out. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and something creative
Yeah.
too, like, or, I guess if you like video games, I do that a lot. I'll sit down and play a video game because it's creative and problem solving. Yeah.
Do you play the ones that you're in?
No, I haven't worked on anything that I've played, I don't think. Yeah. No. Right now I'm replaying through The Last of Us.
Oh, nice. I haven't played that yet. I'm still getting around to it. I'm so late to the party.
It's okay. It's just a great story.
Yeah.
It's an awesome story.
Do you know, like, sometimes when there's a film coming out, but it's based on it's an adaptation of a novel, and I don't know if you do this, but I certainly think, well, I won't see that yet because I want to read the book first, and then
it's been 5 years.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how I feel about The Last of Us with the TV show just coming out. I think, well, I wanted to play the game first. It's like, I'll watch it in 5 years' time then.
Yeah, no, I would actually say with The Last of Us, you could probably watch it before you play the game.
Could you? Okay.
Yeah. It's like, it is my favorite piece of video game art that I've ever encountered. And I think you could absolutely watch the show and play the game, and they're both equally good and equally different.
Yeah.
It's not going to ruin it for you.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll pop it on the list. This is a weird question that I've started to ask at the towards the end of the episode, so do please feel free to ignore it completely. We can move on. But what's a question you wished you were asked more?
I really like this question, but it's gonna need a minute. Well, I'll tell you what something somebody said to me at a time in my life that it made me mad.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you what I wish somebody would have said. So this was a real gift this person gave me. I was getting headshots done in Los Angeles, and I went to get them done, and I was just like in this place where I was like fresh out of school and trying so hard to make it be. Because I was trying so hard to make it be, obviously nothing was being, because it was too much intensity and not enough art making. Yeah. And this guy who was doing my headshots, he put the camera down mid-shot and was like, "Hey, you'll figure it out, but focus on your feedback loop." I didn't understand what that meant because I thought I had just graduated college. I've arrived. I am young. I am ready to go. Put me on the Freeform show. Yeah. I felt like I had arrived. And so it was a really frustrating thing to hear. Like, hey, you need a better way of feeding back to yourself. Like, the thing you're doing is not resonating. It took me another 5 years to figure out what he meant. And I'm glad that he said it. But what it is that I think he was trying to say was the thing that matters more than anything is what you have to say, right?
Yeah.
Ira Glass is like a very famous American radio host, and he had a thing he said many years ago, which is like, your job as an artist is to develop your taste.
Yeah.
And so I wish somebody had asked me about my taste early, because it took me a while to figure out that there was no right way of doing anything, that it was just about making things that didn't exist before. And if it's just about making things that didn't exist before, they should be things you're interested in making. They should be things that resonate with you. And even if they're not things that resonate with you, you have to find yourself in them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, don't do it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if it's just to get the next job, or if it's just to put the shit on your resume, it's why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is about human to human contact, and this whole world, right? It's about entertainment. It's about company. It's about creating something. It's about literature, but it's also just about, like, I am a person. I hope that you can see yourself in me. And so the number one thing is knowing who you are and knowing what you want and what kind of art you like and don't like.
Yeah.
And then closing the gap between the kind of art you want to make and the kind of art you are capable of making. Right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, because like sometimes there's a discrepancy, right? You're like, I want to make an Oscar-winning movie, and then you're like, I can do it, and you get in front of your self-tape camera, and you're like, I really can't do this. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but it's not what I'm doing.
I love that, you know. I really do. And it sort of feeds back to what we were saying earlier about, I mean, this stuff's a lifestyle, you know, in that whole, you know, it's a true journey, and it kind of feeds back to a lot of things we were saying. It also just, you just got to make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons, and that's your own sort of satisfaction, as you say, not just ticking boxes and just moving on to the next thing. Just make sure that you're getting something out of this, because the kind of the stress and the pressure's really not worth it if you're not at least enjoying yourself some of the time.
Yeah, because if you're just going to be stressed, you might as well make more money doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like you might as well just go be stressed on Wall Street.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
like go be stressed elsewhere in an environment that is going to support a lifestyle that is conducive. Just go do, you know, and I think your friend gave you some really good advice, and like, you know, it's a thing that gets thrown around a lot if you can imagine yourself doing something else.
Yeah.
And I think you should be able to imagine yourself doing something else. But if you really want to do this, that's where the magic is, right?
Oh, yeah.
The magic is in the wanting, right? Not in the have to. The magic is in the want to.
Yeah. I think there's like, one of the parts I used to get told off for daydreaming a lot. And I used to daydream, but I still do, and I've come to sort of realize that it's just part of that kind of creative process of just dreaming and making things up in your own head. And like I try and write a fair bit, as well as doing all the other stuff, and I think that that's such an important piece of the project. But it's just one of those things where it's like, kind of, if you're not like particularly down a creative path yourself, it can seem like total procrastination. But I really do believe it's a big part of the process is sort of imagining and coming up with everything in your head first, you know, even if it's sort of visualizing what you're going to do for a narration gig, is like sort of having that time, you know, to compartmentalize things and put things into perspective in your head first.
That's 100%. That's beautiful what you're saying. I totally resonate with that. And it's funny. I had an audition this morning, a self-tape audition on camera. And yes, it was a super fast turnaround. It's a project I'm really interested in. And yesterday I woke up with this impulse to just sit in front of the pages all day and like memorize them and like kind of like squeeze the life out of them.
Yeah.
And then I like had this moment where I was like taking my dog for a walk, and I was like, oh no, outside is where I need to be for this. And it felt like such, like you said, procrastination, because I was just outside for 2 hours walking around just like listening to music and like inspo gathering. but it was the thing that I needed. And I think that that's a huge part of an artistic lifestyle, is knowing what you need at that time and what parts are integral to your creative process, right? Because you'll get thrown a lot of, oh yeah, do this before every whatever, and this is the only way, and like that's just people trying to sell you on their way. It's not necessarily your I think it's really fascinating. I think it's also sometimes like in times where, you know, I often find it like if things are getting really busy and I've got a lot to do and I find myself getting overwhelmed, that it's like the bet, like, because all I really want to do is sit at my desk and carry on working, but I'm getting more and more stressed out. I think I don't have time to do anything else. But then if I just remove myself for 30 minutes, take a walk outside, just take a break, I come back and get more done than I ever would have done if I'd have just stayed there. And I think that I think your brain kind of secretly tells you what you. Well, sometimes it works against you, but then also these, like, you know, just little kind of voice. I was going to say little voices in your head, but it makes me sound mad. But you get my point. No, voices in your head. Also, like, we work in voiceover. It's just all voices in our head.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Gotta get safe with that.
When we've spoken about two of them there. Sewing mooses and of course video games. But I was going to ask, like, when not acting on screen or, you know, in the booth recording, what can we often find you up to?
I play a lot of D&D.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I play every week with my friends, and I'm just getting back into it. I do enjoy that. I like, yeah, video games. I have a dog. I like to take her to the park and watch her run around like a little nutcase. um, yeah, I really enjoy reading and listening to audiobooks. I'm unfortunately like very engaged with the work I do. I love to travel.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm saying like generic.com answers.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I really enjoy reading. I love taking care of my plants. Yeah, I guess I need some more hobbies.
I think they're really good hobbies. I think they're really good. I hope they are anyway, because I share a lot of them. Although I must admit I haven't been able to keep a plant alive longer than about a month, which doesn't speak very well about me. But you mentioned traveling there. Have you been back to Scotland since coming back after studying there?
Yeah, but it's been like, I think it's maybe been 5 years.
Wow.
Since I've been back. Yeah, it's I miss it all the time, but it was a very specific time in my life. And do you ever get this thing where there's like a place or like even if it's just like a coffee shop or whatever that you frequented at a very specific time in your life, and you almost just kind of want to leave it in your memory?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or in some cases, like there's certain pubs that I will not return to because of like these. Just because like I think it's like who you were at that point, and like not necessarily it's like particularly negative, but you've moved on from that headspace, and you're now onto different things, and it kind of, I don't know. For me, it's kind of, I'm kind of scared I'll put myself back into that zone, I guess.
Absolutely, or it just sort of like jogs your memory in ways about things that you're maybe not keen on remembering, you know, or like, or it's changed. And I think that's the biggest, for me right now where I am in my life, like that's it would be sad to go back because I have such a specific memory of it and see something that's not the way it was.
I'd like to, as we sort of close and go towards the end of the show, I'd like to end by just kind of simply asking if you have any upcoming projects. I know, of course, there's one that you can't talk about, but if there's any upcoming projects that you can talk about that you're excited about that we can look forward to.
Yeah, I have. So I did some voices on a children's animation show called The Enchantimals, where I play a hedgehog and a corgi. I really enjoyed working on that one. It was a lot of like squeaky voices. But that one was really fun. I had a book released yesterday, The Protégé, by Jody Gurman, and I narrated that with Cindy Kay, who I'd never worked with before, but she's amazing. And then a really cool title from Brilliance is coming out next month, The Rise and Fall of Ava Arcana. So that one's a really good one, and I narrated that with Samara Naemi, who's amazing. So those are some fun ones, and then hopefully you'll be able to see Shortcomings, which is the one that went to Sundance because it just got picked up. So hopefully we'll know some more about the distribution soon.
Oh, that's fantastic! Yeah. Well, that sounds brilliant. It sounds like you've got a busy time ahead.
Yeah, I hope to connect with more projects that are fun and funky, and yeah.
That just about brings us to a close for this episode of the Audiobook Club. All links to Jess's social media and website will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in, and of course, another huge thank you to you, Jess, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening if you made it this far. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, John.
Frustrated by the royalty rates for your audiobook? Annoyed that when the digital distributors say 70% royalties, they actually mean 70% of 50% or 80% of 70%, neither of which is an actual 70%. Wishing there was a way to cut out the middleman? Yet, you want your audiobook listeners to have a smooth and positive experience, and a direct download sale from your website won't deliver that. We at Pro Audio Voices hear you. Out of our commitment to our author clients, we've created Amplify, a program that provides an actual 65% of the sales price that you set. that gives you access to your customers' names and emails so you can reconnect with them and keeps you in the driver's seat. Check it out at proaudiovoices.com. You'll find Amplify in the marketing menu.